Why avoidants can't handle super empath detachment. There is no shouting, no pleading for explanations, only a silence so resolute it leaves no room for argument. When a super empath, the one who has patiently forgiven, endlessly understood, and soothed every emotional wall an avoidant builds, suddenly withdraws, the avoidant plunges into panic. They have grown accustomed to that unwavering support, to someone always rushing in to fill their emotional voids and calm every storm with an invisible embrace. But when the super empath stops playing the endless chase game, the avoidant loses their scapegoat for control, and what they breathe in becomes a chilling indifference, not the tumultuous waves they know how to ride. This is not anger, it is pure indifference, a poison to a soul that thrives on making others anxious, guessing at their next move. The super empath's withdrawal isn't an attack, it's a frozen mirror reflecting the naked loneliness the avoidant has spent a lifetime fleeing. Most avoidants grow up believing that the empath will always be there. They carry that belief like a shield against every emotional wave, because they've become accustomed to being forgiven without ever having to change, to retreating only to find someone waiting for their return, to being loved even when they can't love back properly. Every time they shut their hearts, suppress their needs, or erect rigid boundaries, they do so knowing there's always a gentle presence ready to dismantle each wall, piece by piece. They have tested it countless times, falling silent for a week, then two, ignoring messages, showing up with distant gestures. And each time, the super empath would reach out, check in, patiently rebuild the bridge. After so many unconditional second chances, the avoidant's mind came to equate love with something effortless, an unchanging safe haven where they could run away without fearing loss. But a super empath is not someone who will love unconditionally forever, because love is not infinite when it's one-sided. They are willing to endure the deepest pain, to embrace every tear and every rebuff, but they also know their own limits. They will withdraw, not because they've stopped caring, but because they have finally begun to care for themselves more. When the super empath quietly lets go for the first time, the avoidant doesn't know what hit them. They're used to that response, a comforting message, a call to reassure them, a smile to soothe. But now there's only an echoing silence, and that silence stretches so wide it tells them, in no uncertain terms, that there's no promise of return. In that moment, the avoidant feels as if they have been thrust into a dark tunnel where their own exhale sounds unbearably loud. They suddenly realize that the super empath's love was not an endless well, it had boundaries, stamina, a breaking point. Inwardly, the avoidant panics. Why didn't she call back? Why didn't he send a quick, "Are you okay?" Those questions, for the first time, go unanswered. They find themselves scrambling because every tactic they've used silent treatment. Emotional tests means nothing when the super empath chooses silence as a mirror, reflecting the isolation the avoidant created in the first place. Memories flood back of every time the super empath showed up, silently comforting during breakdowns, intuitively reading body language, proving that even the most hidden parts of the avoidant's heart were seen. Now, those memories only deepen the avoidant's alarm because they realize their anchor has gone missing. They fear not for losing someone, but for losing the emotional stability they never earned themselves. That crushing emptiness washes over them, forcing the avoidant to ask the question they've always avoided. If there's no one waiting for me, who am I? They must confront their deepest fear, abandonment, worthlessness, the helplessness of no longer controlling another's feelings. This is the shock. Nobody can control a super empath's love. When they withdraw, it isn't a battle of wills, it's a revelation that love cannot be possessed. It is a fragile gift that must be reciprocated. Gradually, the avoidant begins to understand. The super empath didn't walk away to punish, but to reclaim themselves. In the hush that follows, they see all the times they ran from connection, demanded attention, then escaped when it was given. They admit, for the first time, that they turned the empath into an emotional janitor, sweeping up the shards of their feelings without so much as a thank you, let alone a tender touch. Now, with those shards scattered across their own heart, and no one to gather them, the avoidant truly grasps the value of a heart that both gives and protects itself. Yet this lesson isn't easy. The avoidant may attempt to reel the empath back. A casual, "Hey," a story that hints at longing, or an unexpected reappearance as if nothing happened. They expect old intimacies to resume, but the very strength of the super empath's silence, that unyielding calm, stands as a mirror showing the avoidant that if they cling to their old habits using silence as a test, retreating as a defense, this relationship cannot survive. And that reflection is too glaring to ignore. While the avoidant struggles with this inner conflict, the super empath spends the silence tending to themselves, healing old wounds, and learning that clinging to someone who won't meet them halfway is a knife twisting in the heart. They use detachment as medicine, not vengeance, simply to return to wholeness, rooted, free, no longer dependent on another's emotional ebb and flow. Thus unfolds the cycle of silence panic awakening in the avoidant's mind. Each time they think they've cracked the code, the super empath drifts further, not to flex power, but to affirm a truth. True love is not self-sacrifice alone, but a balance of giving and receiving, of patience tempered by self-respect. When the avoidant finally accepts this truth and attempts real change, not to win back the empath, but to heal themselves, they discover the greatest gift in the empath's silence, the chance to live authentically, not behind walls of control and fear, but with the courage to face their own vulnerability, to dismantle their emotional barriers, and to offer love wholeheartedly, not out of strategy, but out of a genuine desire for connection. When an avoidant doesn't fear losing someone, it doesn't mean they're strong. It means they dread losing the one tool that makes them feel safe, their invisible power over someone else's emotion. Their entire emotional identity doesn't lie in genuine connection or understanding, but in their ability to control distance. They pull away before anyone can get too close, then step forward when that person withdraws, always holding the upper hand in the emotional game. Yet, when a super empath, someone who feels deeply, forgives unconditionally, and waits patiently in silence, suddenly withdraws, the avoidant finds themselves without a single card to play. There's no one left to mirror, to control, to define their worth. A move they once thought entirely in their hands vanishes, leaving the avoidant suspended in midair, unsure how to hold on to someone they'd always assumed would stay. 1. Their emotional role is neutralized. You might think they fear loneliness, but no, they revel in it. What an avoidant truly fears is losing their sense of emotional power, the proof that they can still make someone else anxious, guessing at their next reaction. When someone used to rushing in to fill every gap is suddenly gone, the avoidant loses the very role they depended on, instigator of emotional chaos. They realize they no longer have anyone to test, to provoke, to keep at a safe distance, like a fierce game of tug-of-war. Losing that role is like having the mirror to their identity shattered. 2. Their emotional identity depends on control. Imagine an avoidant caught between two voids, the external silence of the empath who walked away, and the internal darkness they've never let anyone see. Their emotional self-worth lives in keeping others off balance, never too close, never too far, so the avoidant alone dictates the rhythm. They pride themselves on never shedding tears, yet they scheme to make others worry themselves sick. They might ignore 10 messages in a row, only to pull someone back in when they've finally broken down. But when that same silence returns with no one there to respond, the avoidant gasps, "I've lost my power." 3. They count on others to fill their emotional void. Avoidants become adept at outsourcing their deepest wounds. Their emptiness is vast like a black hole, but as long as the super empath stays, every crack is soothed, every scar bandaged. They can act indifferent, distant, even cruel, then watch as the empath rushes in to heal the damage. They never had to learn how to sit with their own sorrow or ask, "Why do I hurt?" Silence always triggered a comforting voice on the line. Meeting a void meant waiting for someone to fill it. But when the super empath chooses to stop filling, that void remains raw and echoing. No skill or toolkit exists to patch it. They fumble, panicked, finally recognizing they've never learned how to sit with pain alone. They haven't mastered the art of simply being with sorrow or breathing through quiet moments without running away. 4. Facing themselves, the nightmare they avoided. When no one remains to fill the gap, the avoidant is forced to confront their own reflection. Yet they have no idea how to begin. They'll ask themselves, if nobody's here, who am I? They experience a nameless panic as they place a trembling hand on their heart and hear only their own shallow breaths. All their defenses, indifference, silence, armored composure, come crashing down, exposing a person who never learned to self-soothe, who never learned to care for themselves when no one else would. Their eyes fill with tears, perhaps once, perhaps many times, not from regret over hurting others, but from a deep longing to be accepted, to be soothed, to be seen. They realize they've spent their lives running circles around their own pain, and now that pain has cornered them in absolute stillness. 5. The empath's audience shares the pain, and you, the audience, watch this scene unfold. You've loved an avoidant, cried when they quietly slipped away, held on to unsent messages and half smiles. Now you understand that when an avoidant's silence goes unanswered, they too are plunged into their own private hell. They're not powerful. They're exposed in a void they never learned to fill, in suffering they never learned to heal. Your chest tightens. You bite your lip, thinking, if only I could comfort them one last time, let them know they're not truly alone. But you also know that such an act risks restarting the endless cycle of fill, pull, fill again, and you can't remain the soft cushion forever. 6. A chance for real change. Yet from this pain, a glimmer of hope can sprout. Although the avoidant doesn't realize it, only by facing an unfillable void can they learn to heal themselves. They must discover how to self-comfort, how to name their own emotions, how to accept loneliness as part of life. It won't be easy, but it's the only path that will free them from perpetual control games. And you, as the empathetic witness, play a role in this journey. You can choose to step back to allow both of you to grow, or you can return in a new capacity, not as rescuer, but as companion in learning self-rescue. Either way, you have the right to set boundaries that protect your own heart. An avoidance story needn't end in tragedy. Every human can awaken if they find the courage to face darkness. They can gradually dismantle their walls, practice self-empathy, and learn to love others and themselves without seeking control. And you, the viewer moved by this story, should not stop at empathy and sorrow. Transform it into the strength to preserve your own well-being, to love yourself fiercely, and if necessary, to demand balance in giving and receiving. Because only when you honor the true value of mutual love can an avoidant learn life's greatest lesson. Love isn't possession, it's about sharing and freedom. The silence of a super empath isn't some psychological manipulation. It isn't a no-contact strategy aimed at making you chase, beg, or explain yourself. It is emotional awakening, a deliberate decision to protect one's own inner energy, to grant oneself the quiet needed to replenish, instead of endlessly pouring love into someone who never properly reciprocates. And this very stillness throws the avoidant, someone who believed they controlled the emotional distance, into utter confusion. They suddenly face a question they never expected. Why has the person who used to be there for me disappeared? They thought that by staying silent long enough, someone would emerge from the shadows to heal their wounds. But now there is no voice, no caring glance, only a vast, numbing quiet. They wonder, why aren't they angry? Why aren't they hurt? Why don't they even need closure? These questions spin endlessly in their mind. They know that if this were just a tactic, they would at least provoke some reaction, a sharp retort, a rushed message, or even a simple, "Are you okay?" Instead, they receive nothing but empty silence. They begin to panic within the very silence they once wielded to dominate. Avoidance mastered silence as a special ops unit, striking unpredictably so the other person would feel guilty, helpless, and desperate to make amends. They knew that by pulling back, the other person would chase, would cry, would accept any price to keep them close. But when silence no longer triggers any response, it transforms into a merciless mirror reflecting the inner fragments they spent a lifetime avoiding. Faced with that mirror, the avoidant cannot bear what they see. They cannot look upon themselves, the person who lived by forcing others to worry, to submit, to bend. They suddenly realize the loneliness they cloaked with laughter and indifference. They hear their own breathing, it's shallow and fearful, as if they cannot stand in a moment when no one remains to test. Their panic intensifies as they speculate whether the super empath has truly stopped caring, or whether they've simply discovered something new about the avoidant. They imagine every scenario. Was I too selfish? Did I push them away on purpose? They try to force their heartbeat back into sync with the empaths, to prove they still deserve attention. Yet the quiet continues unbroken, and they find no answers amid the shattering silence. In those first days, the avoidant will pretend to be okay. Finally, some peace, they tell themselves. But with each passing hour, they feel the absence more sharply, not the absence of someone hostile in the relationship, but the absence of the one person who once showed them what safety felt like, who made them feel seen and accepted. They were used to the emotional battles in which the super empath always stepped up to fight. Yet now they must confront the inner battle alone, facing the echo of the void they themselves created. That is when the avoidant truly grasps the terrible truth. Silence is not a weapon nor a tool, but possibly the cruelest punishment when it reflects your own image. They cannot withstand the moment of seeing themselves in that silent mirror, because they know deep down they lack the ability to heal the wounds they themselves inflicted. For the super empath, silence is self-respect, a declaration: I will no longer hurt myself to save you. I choose to save myself first. And when the avoidant stands before that proclamation, they face the greatest lesson. No one else can mirror your true self in your own heart. And love is not about forcing compliance, but creating a genuine connection that requires wholehearted reciprocity. It is precisely when the avoidant can no longer manipulate with silence that real change can begin. They will panic, they will hurt, but in that pain lies the first taste of self-awareness, awakening to the realization that instead of trying to control others, they must learn to govern their own emotions. Only by standing before the silent mirror, willing to face the loneliness they so long evaded, can they break free from the perpetual escape and discover a more authentic path to both love and freedom. Just moments ago, we witnessed the avoidant laid bare in the mirror of silence, stripped of the emotional echo that once masked their loneliness, forced to face the emptiness a super empath had so carefully filled day after day. Now, standing alone in that void, a stark truth emerges. A super empath doesn't vanish out of indifference. They withdraw because they can no longer endure being hurt in silence. Through all those days and nights, they patiently watched, forgave countless cold shoulders, responded without complaint, and soothed wounds with gentle words. But one day, when their own heart runs on empty, they realize they don't need to prove anything. They don't need to be understood or to justify their pain. Instead, they simply need to return to the light, a place where no one demands they sacrifice themselves to hold on to someone who doesn't appreciate them. They step away quietly from the peaceful space, with no bitterness or blame. Their silence isn't punishment but a declaration. I refuse to be the only bridge between us. And when a super empath chooses to leave, the avoidant is laid bare. Every script they'd rehearsed to maintain emotional power collapses in an instant. There is no more push-pull game, no more victim to be tested or tormented by coldness and silence. All that remains is the emptiness inside the very void. A super empath once warmed with reassurance and tender gestures. Now, the avoidant must confront that silence, feel every tremor of the loneliness they once only dared to reveal in fleeting moments. They sense a fracture in their heart that no call or apology can mend. In that moment, the avoidant cannot name their feelings. They panic, not because they've lost a relationship, but because they've lost the supporting role that underpinned all their emotions. They've lost the mirror for their moods, the release valve for their anger, and the comfort of being forgiven. Now, they must learn to feel sadness on their own, to heal wounds they'd always handed off to the super empath. And when the avoidant first asks themselves, "What do I do with this emptiness?" that is the beginning of a new journey. They cannot return to the old game of silence because there is no super empath to restart it. They cannot continue the strategy that once protected them from the fear of rejection. Now, they face the real fear. Permanent silence with no explanations, no forgiveness, no reprieve. This opens a threshold. Either the avoidant accepts that love is not a one-way street, that one cannot live off another person's energy forever, that they must learn to respond to emotions, to respect and care for themselves, or they will remain trapped in self-inflicted loneliness. They have no choice but to mature, to abandon the role of the runaway, and to engage in a dialogue with their own inner darkness. For the super empath, this step is not a total severance. It is a hopeful act that paves the way for a possible reunion when both are stronger. But only when the avoidant is ready to step into the void, to take responsibility for their own feelings, does the light cease to feel unreachable. And then, in the very moment an avoidant thought they had conquered the silence, they experienced an unexpected eruption of emotion. This is when an avoidant, silently scrolls through your story, tracking every snippet you share, asterisk, sends a cryptic message just a lone, hey, or an indifferent emoji, asterisk, or stays silent, but is tormented from within by the ache they cannot escape. But it's not because they genuinely want to come back. They are not seeking a fresh start, not longing for forgiveness or a scheduled meeting. They simply cannot bear feeling invisible to someone who once loved them so profoundly, someone who once understood the subtlest tremors of their heart. Avoidants don't hurt because they lose you. They hurt because you no longer see them as the center of your universe. In the dead of night, they sit with their phone before them, their finger trembling, yet too afraid to press send. Inside, they are gripped by a chilling realization. If I type those words, she might just delete my name forever. Silence suddenly becomes a haunting reminder that they have been deposed from the safest place they ever held, the very heart of your world. They remember the times past, when a simple, I miss you, in your DMs could light up their entire day. They remember evenings you waited for their texts, the way your eyes softened when they admitted a moment of doubt. Now, there is not a trace of any of that. Everything has become invisible. They feel it keenly. No one is listening. No one is waiting. No one has left a space for them in their heart. That moment is the avoidance detonator. They scream silently inside, yet maintain a facade of stoic calm outside. They fear more than anything the shock of realizing that the very person they placed at their emotional epicenter has chosen silence instead. It is not the end of a romance that wounds them the most, but the collapse of a power they once wielded with pride, the power to make someone remember them, the power to make someone scramble to understand them, the power to instill fear of their absence. On sleepless nights, the avoidant wonders, do I still matter? Am I still the first person they think of when sadness hits, or joy arrives, or they yearn for a confidant? When the answer lies silent in your unresponsiveness, they grasp the painful truth. They have been dethroned from your emotional pedestal. That is the deepest hurt of all. And so, when an avoidant sends a cryptic message, they hope for any reaction, not to rekindle the relationship, but simply to affirm their existence. I am still here. When you do not reply, their pain multiplies exponentially. They can no longer comfort themselves with, you must be busy. They cannot reassure themselves with, our story is over. Deep down, they know your silence is the final verdict. From this void emerges an opportunity for the avoidant. This pain may become the catalyst that teaches them how to stand on their own, how to cease relying on another's reaction to validate their worth. They must learn to accept their invisibility and compel themselves to rise to seek a sense of belonging in their own life, not as a strategy for attention, but as a genuine pursuit of self-recognition. And you, the listener, may choose to forgive, to reopen your door, but only if the avoidant has found the courage to confront the pain of being dethroned. Only when they come to you not as a savior, but as an equal companion, can your bond truly endure. At this moment of explosive realization, the avoidant must ask themselves, do I dare let go of the need to always be seen and learn to recognize my own value? When they answer this question, they no longer fear losing you. They fear living a life where they remain invisible even to themselves. Throughout this journey, you have endured countless silences, countless attempts to mend an unfeeling heart, countless sleepless nights clutching your phone for but a sliver of response. Now, standing firm before the silent mirror of a super empath who once forgave every misstep and filled every emotional void with love and understanding, a new door opens. The door to healing and self-worth. 1. Embrace the separation as a beginning. A super empath doesn't disappear to abandon you. They leave to protect themselves from emotional burnout. This is their silent victory. And you, no matter how much it hurts, must recognize this breakup not as failure, but as a pivotal turning point. Here lies your chance to put down the heavy backpack of past regrets, regrets of unrealistic expectations, regrets of clinging to a one-sided bond. Each day, take a moment to silently affirm, this separation isn't the end, it's the beginning of my new path. 2. Let go of the need for external closure. Closure from someone else rarely arrives in full. Often, it's just a note or a flippant comment. True closure lives within you. Create your own internal closure. Write down the unanswered questions, pour every feeling onto paper, then safely file them away. In doing so, you lock the door on that old chapter yourself. Write 3 questions you long to ask, then write the answers you wish you'd heard. Fold the paper, tuck it away, and trust that you've found your closure. 3. Cultivate rock-solid self-esteem. When a super empath lets go, they affirm, "I deserve respect, even without being fully understood. Now it's your turn." Self-esteem isn't something you beg for. It's a spark you nurture in the darkest night. Even if someone tries to extinguish it, you can always ignite it again. Every morning, stand before a mirror and declare 3 affirmations. I deserve love. I deserve respect. I deserve happiness. Speak them until you believe them more than any external voice. Empath. Gentle boundaries, your protective wings. A super empath uses silence as a final boundary. You too must craft gentle boundaries, signals that show yourself and others where safety lies. Boundaries aren't impenetrable walls, but soft veils that let you connect when you choose and shield you when needed. Define 3 clear boundaries. For example, no messaging after 10 p.m., no surprise visits, no deep emotional sharing when you're unstable. Write them down and uphold them consistently. 5. Shift from saving others to nurturing yourself. You may have once poured all your energy into saving someone else. Now redirect that care inward. Ask, which passions did I abandon? Who is my best friend? Rediscover your old joys: painting, reading, walking in nature. List 5 activities you used to love and schedule at least 2 each week. Join a community of like-minded people so you know you're not alone in self-care. 6. Let go of rescuer and learn self-rescuer. A super empath awakens not to rescue an avoidant unconditionally, but to rescue themselves. You must stop expecting others to save you. Self-rescue is the most vital skill. Learn to comfort yourself first, then open to outside love. Ask yourself, when I hurt, what soothes me right now? List 3 answers: meditation, a close friend, journaling, and turn to them whenever you feel lost. 7. Heal through community connection. No one heals in total isolation. A super empath may have once walked this path alone, but they know the power of community. Open up to support groups, empathetic friends, or a therapist. Share your story. Listen to theirs. The pain is always easier to bear when it's shared. Find an online or local support group. Commit to attending at least 1 meeting per month to connect and learn from others' healing journeys. 8. When the avoidant confronts you, hope for the future. The avoidant may resist, cling, or revert to old tactics. But if they haven't learned that love isn't about controlling another's emotions, that love means staying when it demands your growth, they will miss the only chance to truly understand love. You may choose to welcome them back once they transform, but never lose yourself in that hope. Maintain your boundaries, recognize your worth, and only offer love when you're strong enough not to fear new wounds. Healing is not fragile like pain. It may be winding, it may stumble, but every steady step you take towards self-love is a triumph. Like the super empath who chooses mindful silence to stand tall, you too can embrace mindful silence to protect and nurture yourself. Reconnection should never be driven by fear of absence, but by the belief that 2 matured hearts can meet in free, genuine, and respectful love. That is the truest form of love, beyond any game of control. And that is the journey from painful silence to healing stillness. When you choose to let go, not to abandon, but to grant yourself the freedom to breathe, that is when your heart truly begins to come alive again. Don't judge those lonely moments too harshly, because they are the very moments in which you gather strength to love not someone else, but yourself first. If you're watching this video today from a place of pain, remember, there is no failure in loving yourself. Every boundary you set, every moment you remain silently true to your self-respect, is a silent victory. Keep that flame of self-worth burning. Keep planting seeds of love within, and you will see your inner light glow ever brighter. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this message resonated with you, please like and share it with anyone seeking freedom and peace. Don't forget to subscribe to continue exploring the secrets of love and emotional healing. Until we meet again, embrace yourself fully and walk forward with an unshakable courage.